Well, I return you many thanks, Shobi, for that wonderful introduction. My only sadness is that you're in Hodgson and not in Nash, but we can forgive you that indiscretion. It's a well-known fact. It's a well-known fact, fellow Johannians, that Nash is the superior house, and evidence for this. Thank you. And evidence for this fact is that not only is the guest speaker before you a former Nash House member, but so is Hugh Lewin. I jest. Thank you so much, Shobi. Thank you, students, first and foremost, for giving up some time after your break to engage in the serious work of listening to a human rights lecture. I admire your courage and your seriousness for doing so. Thank you so much, Peter, for that introduction which has situated us in the context of Hugh Lewin's life, in Human Rights Month, and indeed in its relation to our community, the Johannian community here at St. John's. Headmaster, members of council, most importantly, Fiona and Tandi, members of the Lewin family, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today. Members of staff, and the entire Johannian community here today and who will be watching this in the days and weeks and hopefully years to come. It's my happy privilege to address this 6th Hugh Lewin Human Rights Lecture, standing in a long line of important lectures that have already happened. People like John Kani, people like Pitika Ntuli, people like Justice Edwin Cameron. And it's a great privilege always to be invited back to one's old school to deliver a speech. And when you're delivering a speech at your old school, it's always an extra bonus that you won't be getting marked for that speech at the same time. So I'm very glad for that. Now, today I propose to reflect on the public life of Hugh Lewin, to help us to appreciate why his life is so important, not only for our school, but also for our country. And I propose to do so in three themes that mirror the virtues to which he strove in his life. Themes that the philosopher Plato reflected on throughout his canon of work. The virtues of to agathon, to aletes, and to kalon. For those of you who aren't ancient Greek speakers, the good, the true, and the beautiful. The good, the true, and the beautiful are the highest ideals, according to Plato. And the interrelation between the good, the true, and the beautiful is humanity's highest purpose. And when we look at the public life of Hugh Lewin, we find the threads of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And how much in our uncertain times do we need to remind ourselves of our highest ideals as a school and as a country? Because there's no doubt that we are all living through a time which the playwright and politician, someone with a similar history to Hugh Lewin, Václav Havel, said, was moving so fast that you don't have time anymore to be astonished. This is what it feels like to live right now. We're on the precipice of a country's most seminal election, where our country's political future, its economic trajectory, hangs in the balance. We're living at a time where machines are becoming more like humans, and humans are becoming more like machines. We're living in a time at the end of a pandemic, the grief of which struck so deep and for so long that we haven't even begun to process it. We're living in a time where the specter of war long thought to have been conquered, is returning to the global picture. And to make matters worse, at home, we've been enduring one of the most prolonged and sustained energy crises that has literally plunged our country into the dark. The times that we live in are humorously and brilliantly described by the African-American poet Terence Hayes, who, in his poem dealing with America's current conjuncture, reflects on how it can feel when things start spinning out of control. And let me share this poem with you, because not only is it a brilliant exhibition of how to use adverbs, but it captures so much of what it feels like to live right now. He writes, "Things got terribly ugly incredibly quickly. Things got ugly embarrassingly quickly, actually. Things got unbelievably ugly quickly, honestly. Things got ugly seemingly infrequently, initially. Things got, ironically, usually awfully ugly carefully. Things got ugly unsuccessfully occasionally. Things got ugly most painstakingly quietly, seemingly. Things got ugly beautifully infrequently. Things got ugly sadly, especially frequently, unfortunately. Things got ugly increasingly obviously. Things got ugly suddenly, embarrassingly forcefully. Things got really ugly regularly, truly quickly. Things got really incredibly ugly. Things will get less ugly inevitably, hopefully." He ends on a tone of hope, a tone that no matter how difficult or crisis-laden the present might feel, things get less ugly, inevitably, hopefully. And this is the lesson of Hugh Lewin's life, a life dedicated to the good, the true, and the beautiful. A life that can help us and guide us in these uncertain times towards our schools and our country's highest ideals. So let's start out of order with the value of the true, the truth. Apart from the bravery of Lewin's life, apart from the beauty of his literature, he ultimately distinguished himself in his life, in his work, and his activism because he told the truth. Can you imagine in the 1950s being a student at St. John's and having the courage to go against all your peers, all your teachers, all the members of council, to stand up and say apartheid is wrong and I and we are complicit? Can you imagine the pressure that Lewin must have felt as he was beginning to build this idea that was germinating in his mind that there was something deeply wrong in South African society, and he was part of it? And it's true that he didn't become the Hugh Lewin that we all know when he was a student at St. John's, but it was those first early years when he would have conversations with Father Trevor Huddleston that ability to start seeing the truth became a hallmark of his character. In his work, Bandit and Stones Against the Mirror, both works of brilliant literary achievement, he ultimately told the truth about South Africa, about the apartheid regime, and about the tyranny and the horrifying and difficult passage that South Africa was going through. As a trainer of journalists when he came back from exile, and as a founder of a publishing house, he also empowered others to tell the truth, to raise their voices, and to have the confidence and the courage to see injustice and speak justice. And the capacity not only to discern truth, but then to speak truth is one of the highest ideals towards which we should all aspire. And Lewin, in his life and his work, ultimately privileged truth-telling. And truth-telling can be a dangerous thing, but as a school community, it's crucial that as an academic institution, we always allow for truth to be told, no matter how unpopular, how difficult. Making this a place where we can tell the truth and where we can debate the truth means that this becomes the academic institution that it has always been destined to be, and that no creed should be too sacred to be questioned. And so, as a school community, how do we privilege truth? Not just political truth and controversial truths, but ultimately as an academic institution, that's what we're all in the business of doing. Seeking truth. That can be mathematical truth, could be historical truth, could be scientific truth. We are ultimately here to try and uncover the mysteries that still present themselves to humanity, find the truth, and communicate it. And who better as an exemplar of that for our academic pursuit as a school, as a community, and as a country than Hugh Lewin? And we must also tell the truth today about the state of our country and about the dramatic inequality, oppression, injustice that continues to characterize this land that we all share. In the words of Don Matera, speaking of those who have been left behind both by apartheid and a post-apartheid South Africa, he says, "I see them every day, everywhere. Non-people in non-transition, moving, shifting, going nowhere, trapped in twilight zones of vacuous expectation, waiting between nothing and nothing." If Hugh Lewin was able to see the injustice of his day, are we able to see the injustice of our day? And to understand that despite our excellence and our opportunity and our privilege, we are ultimately living in one of the most unequal, unjust societies that humanity has yet had the creativity to create. The good, the true, and the beautiful. Let's come on to the second virtue, the beautiful. Leave aside the amount of truth that Lewin was able to speak into his society, such truth that it had to be suppressed by a government. Leave aside his bravery and his self-sacrifice, and just look at his appreciation for beauty. Just that moment of awe as a human being where you see something truly beautiful. You behold it, you take it in, and you are affected by that beauty. And that beauty is a gateway itself to truth and a gateway itself to the good. And look at how Lewin elevated the beautiful in his writing. Not only is it brave writing, but it's brilliant writing. It's beautiful writing. He wielded poetry, he wielded artistic forms, and elevated them for beauty's sake, in addition to the sake of the good and the true. And sometimes we can become too serious and worry about all the issues happening in the world around us and our country and where our school fits and all of that we can forget that sometimes life is just about beholding the beautiful. In those brief moments between engagements and pressing moments in time and petty squabbles, we are ultimately also called to create the beautiful, to produce works of art and works of literature and works of science and mathematics, works of politics that are beautiful. And Lewin's life not only tells us how to engineer the true, but how to have a deep focus on the beautiful. Beauty is truth, and truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all you need to know. That's Keats. There was something beautiful as well in the way that Lewin appreciated the virtue of reconciliation. Not an empty reconciliation that papers over the cracks of injustice, but real reconciliation. Reconciliation which understands that at the end of all conversations, and at the end of all fights, and at the end of all wars, we are still faced looking at each other, needing to enter into dialogue. And in Stones Against the Mirror, one is struck by this pursuit of Adrian Leftwich, the person who sold Hugh Lewin out at his trial and left him in 7 years of jail. And yet, rather than branding Leftwich as a turncoat and a sellout, Lewin seeks to rehumanize Leftwich in this book. He goes in pursuit of him, and it's a wonderful tale of never burning your bridges, never relegating anyone to the point where you can never have a conversation with them again, and truly looking at those in the eye who you think have wronged you or have wronged your society in some way, and saying, we are still ultimately in this together. It's better to assume the best in people and be wrong than to assume the worst in people and be right. And Hugh Lewin, in his beautiful pursuit of truth, reminds us that as a community and as a country, although we cheapen the idea of reconciliation, there is something golden there that binds us together as a community. And we have had some fractious times as a school community, maybe even some fractious times in which I was a participant, criticizing the school. But I ultimately learned that this school will always be a part of me, and all its communities will always be inextricably bound by the fact that we share this community together. And just as we criticize, we must also build and rebuild broken bridges so that we can unite as a school community to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. So for any of those who I hurt in a time where I was trying to tell the truth about the school, I offer reconciliation, I offer bridge building, and I offer ultimately the ability of all of us in this Johannian community to come together to seek a school of goodness, of truth, and of beauty. Last but not least, the good. Consider the sheer bravery of the decision as a white South African, not at a time when the ANC was riding high in the international press, but at a time of banishments and banning orders and suppression acts. Consider the bravery as a white South African to take the decision that you are going to commit sabotage against the government. That must have been the most profoundly terrifying, earth-shattering decision to take. And yet somehow Hugh Lewin found the moral fortitude to pursue that course, ultimately the right course. He and his fellow African resistance movement comrades set about targeting infrastructure in the apartheid state, like electricity pylons, to send a message to the apartheid government that all was not well, that even if they thought that their tyrannical attempt to repress resistance would succeed, that even those from within their own community would stand up and pay the ultimate sacrifice, if necessary, not for them, but for their black compatriots. It's harder to think of a more profound example within our Johannian community of someone who held the good in their sights and had the fortitude to pursue the good, as Lewin did in those moments of sabotage. It's not something that I would recommend to any of you now, of course. And Lord knows that we have enough problems with our electricity supply as it is. He could have used the credentials that he rightly earned for high office and for self-enrichment. A nice ministerial post here, a nice ambassadorial post there. But no, like many others, and here I mention my mother, who happens to be in the audience, also a white South African who stood up against apartheid when it wasn't fashionable. He, like many others, could have used their networks and their credentials for self-enrichment. But they didn't. They went back to the hard work of building the society, of training journalists, or in my mother's case, of working to transform institutions and companies. Not seeking high accolades or high office, but simply pursuing the good, the true, and the beautiful. Listen to Lewin's testimony from the dock as he learns his fate. "I know, my lord," he says to the judge, "that I must go to jail for what I have done." Let's stop there. Most of us, if confronted with a trial in which we were going to be sent to jail, would have our knees knocking in fear and be begging the judge to lessen our sentence, finding some argument why we shouldn't be held accountable. No, he says, "I know, my lord, that I must go to jail for what I've done." And he says, "I know too that what I have said is not likely to lighten my sentence." This is, he's basically asking the judge to give him the full sentence at this point. "But I have felt a need to explain myself, not only to your lordship, but also to those people who by their love and loyalty have shown their trust in me." The good, the true, and the beautiful is woven throughout Hugh Lewin's life, and it's an example and an inspiration to our school community about what we can do with our lives if we hold fast to those values. And in my preparation for this speech, I was thinking that things often come in triads: the good, the true, the beautiful. And it reminded me of another triad: lux, vita, caritas. Lux is the truth. It's the light that we shine on the unknown and the unjust to reveal the truth. Vita is the beauty of being a human being, breathing in and breathing out, creating beautiful artworks, living in all of life's difficulties and joys and pains. And caritas is more than just charity. It's the good, the just, and always seeking to be on the right side of the moral ledger, knowing that we human beings are always imperfect. The good, the true, and the beautiful. Lux, Vita Caritas. I recently became a father. Thank you. Thank you. I needed that after the sleepless nights. I have a 2-year-old son. His name is Hakeem. And nothing will make you think about generations and how generations map onto other generations, like having a child. Hugh Lewin matriculated 50 years before I matriculated. And I'm very sad to say that I will have matriculated 20 years before some of you will matriculate. And our children and Hakeem will matriculate 20 years after that. Different generations, but bound by a single community, a single school, and a single country, in pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful. That's our inheritance, and that's what you, as the current generations of Johannians, must strive to preserve. And I wrote, and I'll end here, as I started, with a poem to Hakeem, asking him to strive for his highest ideals. It goes like this. I pray that you can reach for the divine. I pray that you encounter the sublime. I pray that in... Why are you getting all excited? You knew I was a rapper. I often used to joke with my old friend Kiernan Forbes that I was the better rapper of the two. And we remember Kiernan today, another Johannian who we recently lost. Of course, the rapper AKA. And I really did teach him how to rap. I pray that you can reach for the divine. I pray that you encounter the sublime. I pray that inside your heart you find a galaxy. I pray inside that galaxy you find a mind. I pray that you're not diverted by their flattery, and may you forbear the coarse glare of agony. I pray that you can navigate their fallacies, and may you manifest a gallery of fantasies. I pray you emanate, meditate, levitate to heaven's gate. May you see the face of truth that penetrates. I pray they never pray for your demise, and that you're counted of the prophets and the wise.